Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our next Q&A session here at the Sydney Saxophone Network. I am your host, Nathan Henshaw. Hoping you're all staying safe and warm. It is particularly cold this last few days, so hopefully you're all nicely snugged up everywhere. This afternoon, we have a very, very special guest, quite an esteemed jazz icon within the Sydney community. We have Andrew Robertson. Now, for those who may not be aware, Andrew is a prolific saxophonist, arranger, composer, and ensemble director. And I'm pretty sure, even if you may not have heard of his name, you would have heard his music somewhere here, there, and everywhere. He has performed with the likes of Michael Buble, Boy George, George Benson, Franki Valli, Jerry Lewis. He has also worked with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and Hugh Jackman. He's also quite a prolific arranger, as I said. Many of his arrangements featuring on the show Australian Idol. I believe he had a couple of arrangement or two on the Eurovision Song Contest and various ads and commercials on Australian TV. For those of us who participated in the Schools Spectacular here in New South Wales, I'm sure you would have played a few of his arrangements in the orchestras and stage bands there. He is also a very renowned educator. He has a publishing company called Josbeat Music Publishing, but he also is the director and founder of Jelly Beans Music, which is a fantastic initiative and is a program that's distributed across various schools across New South Wales. So this afternoon, just to extend a big warm welcome to Andrew Robertson.
Thanks, Nathan. Great to be here. Thanks for asking me on.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for coming along. So I'll just break the ice with a nice, easy question. Why the saxophone? What was the thing that gravitated you to that instrument?
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of when I've seen a few of these, and it's interesting how many people didn't actually pick the saxophone, and that the saxophone kind of found them. That's been about 3 or 4 people I think you've said in these have done it, and mine is exactly the same experience. Yeah, so I studied piano when I was a young little tacker, from about 7, I think, and I did that until high school, and then suddenly realised it wasn't that cool. And the school I went to had quite a successful band program, and I went along to the band workshop to pick out an instrument, and I wanted to play the flugelhorn. That's what I wanted.
Random.
Yeah, it's not a phrase you hear very much in the English language, but yeah, I wanted to play the flugelhorn. And at that stage, my asthma wasn't real good, so I could barely blow the thing. And so the teacher at the time, which is John Hibbard, he ran the program there, who many people would know as a great educator. He said, well, why don't you try this saxophone? And he actually gave me his saxophone, this old tenor saxophone, and I sort of played it, picked it up, and went, oh, well, yeah, I can play that. Took it home and I could play it. So that's how it started. Yeah, very funny. No preconceived ideas about it at all, really.
Okay,
Yeah.
so no songs or anything that sort of inspired you, just picked up the instrument and just went with it and...
Yeah, Careless Whisper wasn't even in there. Yeah, I mean, it did come along later on, all that stuff, definitely. I was really into rock saxophone, like all those... The 80s was a great time for rock and roll saxophone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Huey Lewis Band and Dire Straits and all those bands had saxophones, so I was into all that.
Very cool. All right, now you were talking about like your early days with John Hibbard, and I believe you're not originally from Sydney, but a Central Coast boy, and the school you went to was Gorican High School, I believe. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And then from there, you kind of kept going with the saxophone, and then went to uni and did an undergraduate in jazz at the Sydney Conservatorium. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences or as a student, and maybe some key influential teachers or figures that you came across during your time while studying?
Yeah. Okay. So my first saxophone teacher was a guy up on the Central Coast there called Ron Cofield. I don't know if you ever came across him at all. Did you? He was a repairer predominantly up there.
I heard of him, but I never encountered him, unfortunately.
Yeah, like he was a very good English saxophone player who kind of moved out here. And anyway, he ended up being a repairer. So I took my saxophone to him when I was about 13, not long after I'd started playing it, and said to him, this saxophone isn't working. Turned out it was the saxophone was quite fine. It was the actual player that wasn't working so well. So he actually offered me lessons, and I started taking lessons with him, and he was great. He was exceptional, and really powered me along to be able to actually play the instrument quite well. And so from there, so I studied with him pretty much all the way through high school, and all on tenor saxophone. And at the same time, I was kind of learning flute as well. So I kind of played both pretty much sort of simultaneously. But yeah, and then when I was getting towards the end of high school, obviously I was kind of getting into jazz quite a lot by that stage. And I met Dale Barlow at a workshop up in Newcastle. They brought all these great musicians up to this workshop. James Greening, Roger Frampton, Dale Barlow, all these guys all came up. Warwick, I think. Yeah. Anyway, all these cool, heavy-hitting musos came up and did this workshop for a couple of days. So I met Dale there, and I guess he heard me play, and I was doing okay at that point, and I asked him if I could get lessons with him. So that was about when I was in year 11, I think end of year 11, or maybe mid-year 11 or something like that. So I would travel down to Sydney once a week on Saturday morning, and I'd get lessons from Dale, which would be an hour lesson that would end up being sort of 2.5 hours, something like that. I'd just rock up at his place at about sort of 10 o'clock in the morning. I'd catch the train down, and Dale would just be getting up from the gig the night before or something like that, and he'd have a coffee in one hand, and he'd be telling me, which patterns to play, and he'd be shouting out A flat, So he was my teacher for quite a long time, and he was superb, very generous person, obviously an incredible musician. And at that same time, he was actually really woodshedding hard to get. He was in between stints from living in New York. He was about to go back, and that's when he joined the Art Blakey band. So he was really at the top of his game at that point as far as a saxophone. So I was really lucky to get him as a teacher, and then that got me into the con pretty much. and then from there I had 1 year, the last year of Don Burrows. The last year he was teaching at the Conservatorium before he retired. So I had Don as my saxophone flute teacher for a year, which was fabulous. Yeah, it was really cool. He was a tough guy, a tough man, but not just on us, but on himself as well. But he was really super generous, always very open, wanted to make you do the best you possibly could. So no, I really that was 3 really great teachers. I was very lucky through that.
So it sounds like you're very fortunate, like you've got the opportunity to work with, almost jazz royalty within Sydney and Australia. So yeah, it's fantastic.
It was very fortunate,
Sort of keeping in line with that, obviously, like as I said, like there's fantastic teachers, and obviously you would have got heaps out of each and every one of them. Was there a standout lesson or moment that you had with one of these teachers that has sort of really stuck with you and had an impact on you musically, and stuck with you as a lifelong sort of thing?
Sort of. I mean, the stuff Dale gave me, I'm literally still working on that stuff now. Okay. I mean, I'm actually, back into a heavy practice routine again, and I'm still working through that stuff that Dale gave me 25 years ago. So it's pretty amazing. That's cool. Timeless, I can always remember there was one lesson I had with Don when we were at the con there, and we're talking about breathing. I think it was mostly related to flute, because obviously you use a bit more air in flute, tend to anyway. So he did 2 things. He took me up to the opera school, up the top in the old con building. It was up near the canteen, I think, and there was some opera singer singing away, and we walked in on the lesson, and he made me put my hand, you probably couldn't do this anymore, put my hands on the back of her diaphragm on her back.
Wow.
And just to sort of experience how much air how this lady was taking in so much air. And just, it was trying to describe that I was not using my diaphragm, and this is actually what you need to do. And this lady's diaphragm went out it was huge, all this air she was sucking in. So that was one part of that. And then this is another thing you can't do anymore. In the room, he said, lay down on the ground. So I laid down on the ground, and he said, when you're blowing out and you're using your diaphragm, it should be this strong muscle. And when you breathe in, it should push out, So he's trying to describe how to use your diaphragm more effectively, which he did. He had he had a really strong, you could see him actually when he was playing how much air he was sucking in. So he laid me down on the ground, and he just said, okay, breathe in and push that diaphragm out, and then proceeded to drop a telephone book on my stomach.
What?
The old yellow pages, not that they exist anymore, but I don't know if you could get away with doing that. It was a good lesson on how to keep that strong, and I've certainly remembered it forever.
Wow. It reminds me of a similar experience I had. I took a lesson in Bordeaux, and it was this little French lady called Marie Bernadette Charrier, and she was quite similar kind of thing, just trying to get us to do air support, but instead of a phone book, she'd actually just punch us. And she had a lot of strength in that. I have to say.
She probably punched a lot of saxophone players.
I'm pretty sure she has. Wow. Okay. Cool. So that
was a memorable one.
Yeah, I would imagine. Now, going on with sort of just some early sort of experiences and how you developed and sort of where you came to be now. What are some standout musical influences for you, and what about those particular influences is it that appeals to you?
Yeah, well, I guess like when I was learning, as I was chatting before, through that period of the 80s, I was in high school from sort of mid-80s to the end of the 80s. It was a massive time for saxophone in popular music. So I was exposed to it a lot. There was those great bands with Huey Lewis, had the Tower of Power horn section in there. You had all those pop bands at the time had saxophone in them. So I was hearing that regularly. I was really into a guy called Chris White, who was the saxophone player for Dire Straits. I just found that sound. I just went, wow, that's the most amazing sound. And then interestingly enough, what happened was, I think I was really into Huey Lewis and the News and that band, and obviously they had saxophones in their band. And then there's one track where this jazz guy comes on and blasts this solo over the top of it, and it's actually Stan Getz.
Wow.
And they employed Stan to come in, and he actually ended up doing a world tour with them. He went round with the band, and the band would play, and then Stan Getz would come out and play this solo on Small World. Yeah. And for me, it was a bit of an eye opener, because it's in the key of E. So for us on tenor saxophone, it's in the key of F sharp.
Yeah.
And I never thought people could play in that key until I'd heard that. And I figured that they must have played it in F and then moved it up a semitone or something, because there's no way a saxophone player could be that proficient and musical and play in that key. So it was a bit of an eye-opener. And anyway, also along that line was in that band and a couple of those other bands, that's where I first heard altissimo saxophone, doing those crazy solos and stuff. And I never knew what that was. I wondered how maybe they sampled an alto saxophone on top of the tenor part or something like this. And so then, of course, that spurred on, asking the questions about altissimo and how that actually works. And that was a whole new sort of, got the Sigurd Rascher book out and started going through that until my parents decided to kick me out of home. No, they didn't. No, but yeah, so that was interesting. So Stan Getz was a big one early on. So then I started checking him out. And I remember, I think Jim was saying last week, or last session you were talking to him, in our period of time, this is pre-internet. So we didn't have access to a lot of records. And where we were living on the Central Coast, as we were even more isolated from, say, Sydney, where you could go to the record store and you could, buy a cassette or a record, or this is even pre-CD, of an album, and you could order it in, and it might take 6 weeks to get in from America or England or wherever. But I used to go down to the local library in, I think it was in Gorican, must have been, near the school it was anyway. And they had that classic sort of library collection of jazz, which was the best of Oscar Peterson.
Yeah, all the compilations.
The best of Stan Getz. So I used to sort of eat through those. I'd go in and just digest these things. And in a way, I don't want to be like, in our day, we did it this way, but it was very different. And because you didn't have access to a lot of stuff, like, now you can just zip onto Spotify or YouTube and you can listen to anything you want to. Because we didn't really have access to that, you would take that one tape or that one CD or record and you would just play it to death. You would go through it, you'd learn all the solos. So, I got quite into that. And that was really how the jazz sort of thing kicked off, and I got right into it. But it was guys like, here's the main dude. So it was Stan Getz, Scott Hamilton, who is not a super well-known guy, but still out in the scene and playing beautifully. More in the old sort of classical jazz sort of style, I guess. and John Coltrane. Pretty much, they were the three kind of real big influences. I think I got Blue Train fairly early in the piece, and I kind of got that album and just went, whoa, what's this?
Yeah.
My teacher, Ron Cofield, did play me Charlie Parker when I was about 13 or 14, and I didn't have any idea what that was. It sounded like some music from Mars or something. I just didn't compute. So I didn't really get into Parker and probably till late high school before it sort of the penny dropped and I was like, oh, right. Okay. That's what that is. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. But before that, I'd been into Coltrane and stuff. So I was, being a tenor player, I guess I was sort of more into that sound too,
Yeah.
They were the big influences, and they still are to this day. Those people are still big influences.
Oh, no, very cool. So just sort of talking with those influences and what you were saying earlier, like, just where we were on the Central Coast and things like that, it was quite limiting in terms of what we had access to and whatnot. And then obviously, coming to the Sydney Con and getting exposed to all these great musicians and great music, live music as well. Did you pursue any further study, or did you go overseas and go and check out some things? And what was it that you sort of checked out, and what was anything that stand out in terms of that? Yeah,
well, obviously I did the con. When I was through the con, it was only 2 years, so it was in and out. You're done. So I was out by the time I was 20. I was out. Wow. And then I went to New York. So that was pretty much. New York for jazz is the mecca around the world. So I think I did maybe 1 or 2 years of gigging when there were gigs,
Yeah.
Funnily enough, that period of time, I'm teaching there at the moment at the con, and I tell my students, when we came out of the con, we were all working 5 or 6 nights a week. It was that busy. There was so much work. So I remember doing that for a couple of years, and then I went to New York. I think 92 I went to New York. Yeah.
Okay.
And I kind of lived there for, I think it was like 5 months or something like that. And I didn't go to, I didn't even think that was an option to go to a school there. It never even occurred to me that I could possibly even go into one of the schools. So what I did though, it was an amazing time. I used to just get the Village Voice every day, and I'd look at the list of players and where they were playing. And it was, Joe Henderson, Branford Marsalis, Kenny Kirkland, everybody basically.
Wow.
Cedar Walton, anybody you wanted to see, they were all playing in New York, and you would just go, oh, okay, tonight I'll go there, tomorrow night I'll go there, tomorrow night I'll go there, and you'd plan your week ahead and you'd go and see these people play. And then while I was there, I just got lessons from various players individually, like independent lessons. I got some lessons from Ralph Moore, the tenor player. I got a lesson with Joe Henderson, which I was super buzzed about. After going to his gig 6 nights in a row, I finally got the guts to ask him for a lesson. And he gave me a lesson at the back of the club. He said, let's go over here, man. And we just went over the back of the corner. And for the next hour or so, he just sort of went through stuff and told me a whole bunch of things.
Sweet.
So that was that. Vincent Herring, I got a lesson from him, the alto player. Yep. Gary Smullian, the baritone player, who's a big, well-known sort of sideman in New York, killer baritone player. Yeah, so just private lessons like that. And just seeing those guys. And basically what I would do is I would go and see the bands at night time. I'd be so inspired. The next day in my hotel room, I would take the mouthpiece off and just practice, for 5 or 6 hours a day, just doing technical stuff. And then I'd go out and see another gig that night. Yeah, it was a great time.
Nice. It sounds like absolutely like a dream, like come true. So just go to New York and, getting to interact with these guys, and it's a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, it was.
Now, you were saying you went through the con, and you were literally walked straight out the door, and you were hitting the gig scene, and you were working like almost every night, and continually you have been working non-stop, performing up until March, I'd imagine. But and at the start I was saying you've worked with some phenomenal musicians. Is there a particular highlight in terms of performance that really sticks out in your memory, and what is it about that particular concert that really sort of made it a memorable experience for you?
I saw, your question came through, and I thought about that, and it's a bit of an odd answer. I really did think hard about this. I've been lucky to play with lots and lots of people and lots of, concerts and pretty cool places and people and venues and stuff. So but you'd be surprised. The one that really stands out. This is going to be really odd.
Okay.
But every year, up until this year, of course, the New South Wales Department of Education runs this thing called the Festival Instrumental Music, which is for primary school kids, and it's predominantly recorder based. So all these kids learn recorder and strings, and so they have at one point 800 recorder players all through the back of the Opera House, and 250 string players on the stage, and often I get to write music for it. Either compositions or arrangements of things that I've done, mainly compositions, fortunately. Anyway, one year I had to do this thing I did it with the pipe organ. We actually got to use the pipe organ and all the recorders. And the thing about this program is that it's open to all state schools in New South Wales. And so you're getting all these children from all parts of New South Wales that would never ever get music education. And because it's offered for free, this program, they bring the teachers into the city, and then they go out to their schools and they teach the music to them, and the kids learn these 3 or 4 pieces by memory, and they come in and they do a concert at the Opera House. It's unbelievable. So these kids are, many of them have never been to the city. Many of their parents have never been to the city. It's such a gas. It's a real blast. Anyway, so yeah, I just remember standing on stage one time when they did that, and they started playing, and all 800 recorders and the pipe organ started playing, and it was unbelievable. Now, it's not something you'd think you would. It's not a dream you have of like, oh, recorders? Yeah, 800 of them, yeah. And 250 string players all playing, scratching their way through it. But it sounded amazing, and it was one of those real, when you think about all these other great gigs you get to do and stuff, you just go, wow, that one's pretty cool. Yeah. And I wasn't even playing. I was kind of just there as a, composer sort of, person.
Yeah. Wow, that was definitely not the answer I was expecting. But no, it sounds like a great. It would have been an awesome sound though. For sure.
It was. Knocked your socks off.
Oh man. Okay, cool. Well, in terms of, as I said, like you're an active performer, and you've had years and years of experience, and you've done all the different types of gigs out there possible. What advice would you give to younger musicians looking to break into the professional music scene? For instance, like in terms of networking, like how much importance is there on that? What in particular emphasis for a saxophone player, what sort of skills and things should they be working on and developing to help them get in and crack that scene?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because the scene is so different to what it used to be, obviously now, but it will come back. It won't be like this forever, but it is coming back already, so that's a good thing. Yeah, it's a tricky one because, obviously I'm teaching people who are about to go out into the workforce and become, professional musicians. So I'm already offering this advice or trying to sort of steer people, or asking them what they want to do. I think pretty much you have to be a master of your instrument. Like you really have to put the hours in. And I don't expect people coming out of the con, most of them, there are always exceptions, but most people that come out of the con, you've probably still got, a year or 2 or 3 or something of really hard practice ahead of you before you start to get. I think the con or any music institution, it should be like any tertiary music education institution, brings you out to a point, where you are at a very competent level. But I don't feel that you are necessarily at the level of coming out at the level of, say, the pros are, who have been out there doing it for a long time. You do need to put in some serious hours on your instrument to get to a level of proficiency. I remember reading some research or some information about practice, and it was some discussion with Stan Getz and Charlie Parker. They interviewed them years ago about their practice regime, and both who were superbly proficient musicians, on their instrument. And they both said the same thing, was that period of life from sort of, late teens to early 20s, they just practice relentlessly, like 8 hours a day. I know when I came out of the con, I went through the same process. I had a period of practicing 8 hours a day for at least a year, and then I was kind of burned out after that. But they said the same thing. They kind of got to a point after doing that for maybe 2 or 3 years of really, really woodshedding, so they got their instrument to a super high level. And then they really didn't practice that much after that because they'd kind of reached that point. having said that, they were gigging every night, and
Yeah.
they were playing at a high level every single night, so they were kind of built into it. But for us, where we don't necessarily have that, you do, like, to get out into the real workforce, I think you have to have that basic level of proficiency, which is really high. You sit in a big band of players these days, or you get into a recording session, you're not exceptional if you can play superbly well. That's like everybody in the whole session is going to be able to play like that. That's like the given entry point. So I think the bar needs to be quite high as far as your technical proficiency on the instrument, which just means hours of practice. So that's definitely one thing I think people have got to work hard at. But then, the networking thing, you've just got to get out there. You can't, we could have waited for the phone to ring. There was a time when the old landline phone would ring, and you would, or you'd go home and you'd push the answer machine and go, oh, have I got a gig? Oh, it seems I have. But now you have to make your own work. So that's what's changed. And that's the change for all of us, like professionals as well as people coming into the industry as well. You have to go out and make your own work. You know that. You do that with your ensembles. You make things happen. You just have to go in and put together ensembles. You have to get out there. You have to do as much playing as possible. It's always that dubious one about whether you play for free for the exposure. Somebody said to me once, you can die from exposure. That's a tricky one. You do need to do as much as you can. If that means a couple of freebies, then that's okay. But obviously you don't want to bring the level of musicians down any further. But definitely get out there as much as you can. Make as much music as possible. If you're writing music, arranging music, you've got to get out there, and everybody you meet, or every gig you work, or every person you meet, you've got to tell them you write music. And if you can write a chart for them, and it stimulates it. I get a lot of people ask me, how did you get into arranging, and how do you do that? It's the same process as we do for playing. You just got to let everybody know that you play flute, or I can double on clarinet, or I could, do this or whatever. When you're networking and meeting people, you just got to let people know. Otherwise, they're never going to know. And
yeah.
Also, you got to be a nice person.
Yeah, that's a very it seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how much of a difference that makes.
People need to enjoy working with you.
Yeah.
If they don't enjoy working with you, you probably won't work with them again.
No, that's very, very helpful advice for sure. Now, just sort of, as I was saying before, you were quite active up until recently with the COVID stuff, as the rest of us. And, you've been playing gigs left, right, and center, like non-stop. And I know that you're, even now in this current time where things have slowed down quite a lot, you're actually still quite active doing an assortment of different things. A couple of things that you've sort of popped up with recently in this COVID time is you've put together a few virtual things, in particular your virtual big band, which I believe you called the At Home Big Band, which features an absolute killer all-star lineup of players. What was the inspiration behind that particular project, and how did you end up pulling it all together so well?
Yeah, that was a big job, but when we went down into lockdown, I don't know, I really got into practice again. It was I think for many of us, we found everything slowed down for us. We didn't have gigs we had to go to. We didn't have teaching we had to go to. So we had a lot of time on our hands. So I really got back into practice in a sort of quite a serious way. And I just felt like this was a great opportunity for all of us who weren't doing anything. It just sort of came to me. I said, maybe we could do one of those things. I just thought about it. And I had all these charts that I've written for different bands and stuff just sitting there that don't often get played because they're not really commercial. They're a bit more, a bit more jazz than, it's a bit more jazz than In the Mood, if you know what I mean. So you can't get them out onto gigs that often. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity maybe to see if we could get a bunch of the guys together and record these. And so I just approached a couple of guys and said, look, I'm thinking about doing this thing. What do you reckon? And I think I'd seen one of those bands in America do one. And I went, okay, we could do that. So anyway, I just approached all these guys. And funnily enough, those are the people that you could not normally get in a real world because they're all busy. I know, like For example, Anthony Cable, the trombone player, one of the lead trombone player, he's in China back and forth, going and playing in television stuff over there and Hong Kong, and all the other guys are doing sessions. Gordon Rittmeister's like he's impossible to get because he's so busy. But there we all were with no work and all locked in. So I just put it to these guys and I'm like, yeah. And I'm going, there's no money in it. And they're like, yeah, it's cool. I think they were just happy to play and have a project ahead of them that they could actually work on. And for some of the guys, funnily enough, some of those people, actually all those people are big recording session musicians, have been recording for years. Quite a few of them had never recorded at home, so they didn't have their own gear or their own setup. And I guess, as we all know, as we all sit here with our microphones, and we all went out and bought USB microphones and set ourselves up with digital audio workstations. And it was a bit of a learning curve for quite a few of us. I mean, I was already doing that stuff, so that was okay. But a few of the guys, it was a learning curve. Anyway, we just put it together, and I just got the guys to record it. And they sent me their parts, and then I dropped it all into Logic, and they filmed it, of course. And then I've done quite a lot of film stuff with, for my education business. So I'd already done like a lot of film work and editing of film stuff. I guess the things you end up doing that, you don't learn at the con. How to edit digital audio and how to edit digital video.
Yeah, I saw that coming.
Yeah. So anyway, the guys that, ladies and gents, they all filmed their stuff and they sent it in, and I sort of patched it all together and then mixed the band as best I could and turned it out. And we did the first one that came out, and it sounded really good. I was really pleased with how it came out, and lots of people thought it sounded good. And then I just asked the people again in the band, I said, do you want to do another one? And we were still in lockdown and they were up for it. So that's when we did the one with Emma. We got Emma Paskin to sing on it. It was just, I think it was, for a lot of those people, it was something that was a project ahead of them that they could keep inspired and keep practicing for and keep working towards. So it was actually good for all of us.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I've just seen the videos, and it's phenomenal how it's all come together. So it's great.
Yeah, I was really pleased with it. Yeah.
Now, are there any other online projects that you're working on currently, or are you having a bit of a break for the moment?
After we did the con one as well, right? Because I run one of the con big bands. We have 4 big bands at the Conservatorium now, and I run big band 3. And so we did the same. So I did 2 of those with the con students as well. And that was, so between the 2 that I did for the pro guys and the 2 for the students, we ended up with, that was a lot of editing.
I would imagine.
That took me probably pretty much the 3 months of the lockdown. That was pretty much that whole time was devoted to editing all that stuff and putting it together. And so after that one, I kind of, we started a third one for the Conservatorium students. So we may do that one, but at the moment it's kind of on hold. I would actually like to do another one with the pros. I'm actually kind of keen. A couple of the guys suggested we could do an album like that. And I think that's a possible thing to do. And I often think, actually, from now on, I think it's actually going to be the way of the future for a lot of recording. I've done some recording sessions lately, but I've also done quite a few online. Like I did one yesterday, but that seems to be the way. Now that we're actually all set up with digital workstations, rather than going into actual recording studios, we can actually do a lot of it at home. And I think that's where we're going to be going for in the future. So...
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Well, certainly a lot of people I talk to, and even myself, just sort of being asked to do a lot of stuff virtually, like you record at your home thing, then bounce the tracks back, and it seems to be becoming more and more common. Yeah. I actually remember hearing that years ago. I don't know if you remember, there was a movie, Catch Me If You Can, that Tom Hanks and Leo DiCaprio, and the score is John Williams jazz sort of score. I'll use that term loosely, but it was a really cool sort of 50s score. But I heard that the saxophone player, Dan Higgins, who is an LA like super famous session guy, when that came out, I think that's like maybe early 2000s or something like that. I don't know. He recorded it from home. He had a whole setup from home, and he recorded it in his pajamas, and sent this thing in. A lot of that, because it's featured, the alto saxophone's featured in that. Yeah, and he sent it in apparently, and I was like, wow.
imagine not going into he could record it at home. That's amazing. It was like going to the moon. Yeah. And now we're all like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's commonplace. Oh, okay. No, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. He's actually, John Williams actually, I think he must have transcribed what Dan recorded, and he's actually put it in print as a work. So it's called Escapades. And it's like a 3-movement sort of concerto-esque type work that's sort of a saxophone feature with piano reduction. So, but there is a orchestral, full orchestral score that goes with it as well. So,
wow!
If you feel like getting a virtual orchestra together,
yeah,
cool. All right.
Yeah,
now, sort of moving on to things that now we talked about, how amazing you are as a saxophone player and instrumentalist, but we also mentioned that you were very equally proficient at being a composer, an arranger, and an educator. You had sort of talked about, letting people know about how versatile you are as a musician being an important thing, because you just never know what you might get called up to do. Why did you feel the need, for you personally, to branch out into these different areas of music making?
Well, the arranging thing, I've actually done it forever. So I did my HSC. I did a big band arrangement. So I don't know. I we're talking. I got piano lessons when I was a kid, and it was that classic sort of old lady who would used to read over the knuckles with the ruler if you didn't have your fingers up. But she taught me harmony. So I was 8 years old. I wanted to play. Songs from Kiss, and she was getting me to play Bach and teaching me harmony, like how scales worked and how chords worked when I was 8 or 9 years old. So I was like, wow. So by the time I got into high school, I was actually kind of quite proficient, already understood a lot about how harmony works. So I think it was like a natural progression to get into, when you're into jazz, we tend to write for big bands rather than say for orchestras. If I was going down that other path, I mean, now I do write for orchestras, but that's a whole different game. But so it's it just happened anyway. So by the time I got to the con, it was just like, oh yeah, I play saxophone and I write charts, So, and from that early point, as soon as I do a gig, back in those days as we were talking, there was gigs galore. People needed charts. There was lots of people playing gigs, lots of larger groups. Like there was, 4 or 5 10-piece bands in Sydney just going, and they were all working every night of the week, 3 or 4 nights a week, So there was a lot of people that needed charts. So I just got all this work from writing charts. And I think it just it wasn't like I went, I need to write charts, because it was already happening. Okay. And so definitely something that I try and encourage the con students to do is to get into, you've got to have multiple streams. If you're going to work as a musician and just survive as a musician, you need to be able to do multiple things. You can't just be a jazz saxophone player. You have to be able to write for 800 recorders and 250 string players when the call comes. Yeah. I know, like this is, here it comes. This is the truth for the Schools Spec Orchestra. I think when Steve Williams first called me and said, "Hey, do you write for orchestra?" and I went, "Yeah," having never written for orchestra. That was a quick trip down to the bookshop to buy Rimsky-Korsakov's Principles of Orchestration, and a couple of weeks of heavy study on that, pre-internet and pre-YouTube, how to write for an orchestra. So that's another example of, you just got to say yes. I think you've got to say yes, back yourself, and then study hard if you don't know how to do it, work hard on how to do it. And that sort of opened up that door as well. And now I get to write quite a bit for sort of strings and woodwindy things, and sometimes orchestras. So definitely. And I think you just got to have your mind open. It's same with the education thing. Like, I didn't go out and go, I need to have an education. I need to do education. It was already there. Having said that, I will say that probably about 15 years ago, when I had, actually probably it was about 18 years ago when I had my first child, that brings home a reality to you that you can't just be a jazz musician. It's like the old gag, the jazz musician and the pizza. A pizza can feed a family of 4. It was that situation. I think I suddenly went, oh, okay, I better actually get serious about, being able to make a living out of this. At that stage, so this is, early 2000s, I kind of could see that the live performance scene was dying. And I kind of started to think, okay, what else can I do in music that is that is going to supplement my career as a player, that I don't have to work too hard on, that I can sort of build on, that'll look after me. And I was already doing education, and so that's when we started the Jelly Beans program, which was, designed to sort of be able to have another avenue in case the performance work completely died. Mm-hmm. And that did take when the GFC hit in 2008, 2009, that's when I think, as you'll know, a lot of us really, that's when the first real kick to the guts of live performance stopped, because all the advertising budgets dried up, and suddenly there was no, little trios in the back corner anymore, and of every function in the city. So yeah, I guess you just got to look ahead, keep thinking about what you can do. You can make a living out of being a musician. I definitely believe you can. You just have to be aware of all the options. These days you should be looking at things like digital film scoring, digital writing for computer games. There's all that sort of world, writing library music, whatever it is. There's a lot of options out there for us. We just have to look and see. If you really want to be a musician, you can do it.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really interesting. Now you sort of touched on that with sort of how you got into arranging, and sort of was doing it sort of concurrently with what you're already doing existing. Is there anything that you would sort of suggest to anyone looking to sort of get like a starting point for anyone wanting to sort of get into arranging a little bit more, in terms of maybe what sort of things they should be checking out, or any particular skills they should try and work on to help them with developing those early stages of developing arranging skills, I guess?
Yeah. Well, if you're not lucky enough to be at the Conservatorium and doing jazz harmony and arranging course, then if you don't happen to have that one fabulous course going on, there is quite a lot of information online these days to get into actually arranging. There's a few courses you can do. The Berkeley online courses are really good. I mean, I've never done them myself, but I know people who have done them, and I've checked out some of their documentation and stuff, and it's really good. I would recommend people, if they're interested in doing that, do that. That's certainly a good place to start. They've got the world's best musicians up there doing that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But you've got to listen to the music. If you're going to write for orchestra, you need to know what an orchestra sounds like. You've really got to get in depth with it. If you're going to write for it, that's one thing I would say. Like, you can't write for an ensemble that you don't really like. If you really don't like recorders and strings, then you're never going to get,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How did you overcome that hurdle?
I didn't think I'd like it, but it turned out I did. Yeah, you've got to, as with anything we do in music, you just have to. Well, I think it's like a language. I often discuss it like to students like it's a language. If you don't like listening to people speak French, don't go and try and learn French. You need to immerse yourself in that experience. You need to, for anything in music. But if you're going to be an arranger, you've got to go and plow into all that. I recommend listening to, if you're listening to, want to learn small band arranging, you've got to listen to all the West Coast writers, the West Coast arrangers, Mel Torme, Marty Paich, who else? And then you get into the Nelson Riddles and all those people. You've got to get into the small band writing stuff on the West Coast is fabulous, from the 50s and 60s. That's like where they're really good. Bill Holman, another great one. And then, of course, if you want to get into the big bands, you've got to start back at somebody like Fletcher Henderson, Don Redman, of course, then going into Duke and Count Basie and all that sort of stuff. You've got to know that music, and you've got to get inside it. One thing I think that certainly helped me was transcribing a lot of that, and that wasn't because I was being really sort of astute. It was because somebody was paying me to do it. They go, "Oh, can you write Fly Me to the Moon Out?" I go, "Yeah, great." So, I get immersed in the Count Basie, put the headphones on, and I can hear all the arranging skills that are going on with Sammy Nestico or whoever it might have been, Don Costa or whatever, Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I must have written pretty much all of that Live at the Sands album and all these other Frank Sinatra stuff with Count Basie and all these different things. And while you're doing that, you're actually really immersing yourself in the music. So now you go, oh, okay, I hear that saxophone thing. I know exactly what that is because I know what the Basie band did. So, yeah, definitely, if you don't have a reason to do that, go and do it yourself. Go and transcribe one of those things, and you'll suddenly yeah, it's the best way to learn it for sure.
Oh, cool. And in terms of your composing, I'm guessing, well, I'm just assuming here, is it a similar kind of process in terms of just immersing yourself in the sound world that you like, and then sort of developing a sound bank of, sounds that you like and harmonies that you like, and then using that to help construct? Is it a similar process, or is it a bit different in terms of your composition style?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. That's exactly it. I think you just immerse yourself in a sound that you're liking, because, depending on what it's for, if you're writing for a specific project, you might be listening to one sort of music. If I've got to write for, a different ensemble, a school ensemble, for example, or, a particular ensemble that's asked me to write for something, then you have to go and listen to that music and sort of get your head into that space and go, okay. And for me, it's like, I'm definitely not as good a composer as I am an arranger. I work in a band called Hammerhead, which is, we do a lot of gigs around Sydney, and Jason Brewer is the saxophone player, and he's the composer for that. I just marvel at the compositions. Like, I look at what he writes and just go, wow, that's, I don't know if I could do that. It's a different sort of headspace, but I could arrange that in a big band and make it sound amazing. So there's a different set of skills, although they were quite similar. And then the composition thing, yeah, pretty much the process is immerse yourself in it, for me anyway. And then I kind of like, imagine how it's going to come out. I just sort of sit there and sort of, usually a good composition will start to sort of present itself on the piano or on the paper in front of you, Yeah. Rather than, I'm not a good, see, that's where, say, somebody like, Jason is really good. He's a craftsman. He takes a composition and he'll work it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And he'll tweak things and do this. And that's fabulous. I could do that with an arrangement. Like, I'll redo that with an arrangement. I'll go back and I'll change this and change that or whatever. But with a composition, my particular way, I try to just sort of let it flow out and let it come out. If it doesn't come out and I have to start forcing it and start to try and force compositional things into it, it never turns out that good. I could probably just toss it in the bin. Yeah, or come back to it maybe, a few years later or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Definitely different processes, even though in arranging you are composing a lot of it, because you've just got a main lead line, but you've got to compose all the stuff that goes on inside. So in that sense, it's composition, but you're working within a set framework, which I find I like that part. It's the open canvas that you just go, oh wow, okay, where do I start?
Yeah. It's a bit more daunting, I'd imagine, sort of in comparison from arranging to composing, where you're the ones that have to create the ideas and then elaborate on it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow, no, that's cool. Now, the Jelly Bean program. Now, you sort of touched on that a bit earlier. Could you explain about what it is? What's its sort of philosophy, and just about the program itself?
Sure, yep. So Jelly Beans Music is it's a primary school classroom program based in New South Wales, although we have a big growing business in New Zealand now, which is good. Well, they call it Jelly Beans over there, but anyway. So it's grown from what it is. Basically, a lot of schools in New South Wales, state schools and Catholic schools predominantly, don't have classroom music. In Queensland, I can see Rianta's online with us today. She'll know. In Queensland, they have primary music educators in pretty much every school, and that's government run. So that's the state government runs that, which is. You might say a lot of bad things about Joe Bielko-Peterson, but that's one good thing he did for that state. Really amazing programs up there. We don't have that here in New South Wales, and most other states we don't have that either. There's a big hole in music education for primary school kids. Pretty much all private schools will employ a music educator because they see it as a valuable part of their offering to students, which it should be. But even though it's mandatory in New South Wales, it is often, just put on a CD or put on the radio, or maybe somebody at the school plays guitar and they'll strum a few chords, and that's the music program. So it's really, really a big open hole. And as I got involved in publishing music for schools many years ago, we wrote these big percussion books called Jelly Beans and Other Sweets, which is basically like a percussion resource that students play along to a CD and they play the coloured dots and all this sort of stuff. And those books went out around the country and overseas and everything. They've gone really well. And it's what it does is it enables just general classroom teachers to put this book in front of students, put the CD on, and they they can all do it. It's not hard. And so from that, we ended up doing workshops in schools to show teachers how to do it, like non-music specialists. And then after that, we actually had schools come and say, look, can you come in and teach our children? So we put together a program in 2008. Yeah, end of 2007, start of 2008. So we started with, I think, 4 schools in Sydney. And basically what we do is we've got a team of music specialists, primary music educators who are all they've all got their degrees and blah, blah, blah. And then we pop them into the school. The school comes to us and says, we don't have music, can you help us? We pop the teacher into the school for a term, or for some schools it's for the whole year. And we basically just do classroom music. So it's not band, it's not teaching band, it's just teaching everybody classroom music. So, we do things like Kodai and solfege, pitch development. All the children play glockenspiels and recorders from year 3, and singing and movement and dance and all that sort of stuff, all encompassing. So the whole point of it is, I'm pretty passionate that every child, and because I'm a result of this, it was just by freak circumstance that, and you may be in the same boat. I think a lot of us were at that, we just happened to fall into a school that had a music program. A lot of schools didn't have them. And if I didn't have that school, I probably would be doing something completely different. It wouldn't be music, Yeah. And it's just this one small opportunity. And a lot of children don't have that opportunity. So that's why I get really passionate about the Instrumental Festival, because a lot of these children who would never get music education, that goes out to, I think, what's the number? It's a big number. 3,000 kids, I think, involved in that every year. Jeez. So it's a lot of children, And so our program, the Jelly Beans program, I think we get, I think we're up around 8,000 to 9,000 students a year go through our program.
Wow.
So it's a lot, and it's growing. It's because schools realise the value of having culture and arts in their school program, and if they can't offer it, then that's kind of when we step in. And we've written all the programs, like we've written everything from kindergarten through to year 6. It's all age specific, and basically, the kids love it. You go in and see the children doing music, and they're just having a ball, So that's kind of what drives it.
Okay. No, it sounds like it's a fantastic initiative, and as you say, it rightly so. It gives children who may not necessarily have had the opportunity or exposure to music, gives them, at least a taste of what potentially could be there, and sets them up with some skills that they can take on if they decide to pursue music later on. So it's fantastic.
Yep. I mean, we're not ever intending people to become musicians by any means. No. If they just have this great experience of fun, the fun we had when we were kids as doing music in classroom, it's such a gas, And it does have all these other side effects, which research shows, all the stuff that it does for the brain development, vocabulary, mathematics, all those sorts of things. That's all on the side. That's jolly good, but actually just doing music is pretty cool by itself.
Yeah. And, as you say, fun. It's
fun.
Yeah. All right, cool. Now, you yourself personally, you teach, and I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but you casual lecturer at the Sydney Conservatorium, running a big band and teaching jazz harmony. How would you describe your overall teaching philosophy in terms of over the years and experiences, and the things that you've learned? How has that sort of formulated your approach to teaching?
Yep. Okay. So it's the same process as if you would do for primary school. I pretty much try and pitch everything at primary school level.
Okay.
That's about all I can understand. So if I can understand it, then I'm assuming they can understand it. That's a big part of it. As a teacher, especially now, because we are in a different era where that whole sort of the teacher knows everything and you're the student, you don't know as much. That doesn't really exist anymore, because there's so much stuff online now that you can zone in and get a lesson from Chris Potter or, one of the world's great people. So realistically, I mean, I kind of see my position as just somebody who can act as an intermediary for the students. I can provide them with a bunch of information. I'm not the holder of all the information. I know a bunch of it, but you'll probably find a whole bunch of other great information somewhere else from other teachers. So definitely that's a big part of it. And being able to be open to students' different directions, not every, obviously. say at the con, for example, people come through my course, they have to do it because it's a compulsory part of the jazz course is to do this thing. I'm not expecting everybody to come out as a jazz arranger by any means, but if what we can do, look at every student and go, okay, this person's probably not becoming a jazz arranger, but and this has happened recently. I've seen one of the students from last year just did this great, contemporary sort of soundscape, that's just come out and is used. I can hear all these elements of like the study that person's done at the harmony class. So yeah, it's about being able to make use of whatever that student's interested in and trying and sort of guide them into the direction that they really want to go into, rather than going, okay, this is what you have to learn and you're going to learn this. I think that era of learning is very dead.
Yeah, that dogmatic approach where like, this is this and this is that. No, it's true. Like in the digital age, like we've got so much information at our fingertips. Like there's a wealth of information out there. Now you, as I said, like you taught a lot, and I had the good fortune to have a few lessons off you back in the day. In terms of your teaching, if there's one thing that you want your students to take away from any of the classes that you have, or rehearsals, or lessons with you, what would be that one thing that you would like them to sort of hold on to and remember?
I think it's just a love of music. That's it. It's very simple. Like if it's a big band rehearsal, or it's a harmony lesson, or it's a one-on-one, I think you just got to come away with it just going, yeah, music. Whatever you do as the teacher, you've got to have, you want to pass that on to the students, that they come away feeling buzzed, that they will then go and educate themselves, So yeah, it's just a love of music, really. I know it sounds pretty daggy, but that's it.
No, it's simple. Yeah, it's true. Like it's an infectious, just that passion, enthusiasm does rub off on students, and yeah, you can see that when it carries on. Now, COVID-19, we're all sick of it. And rightly so. It has been dragging on for quite some time, and it has affected all of us in various shapes and forms. And we talked about some of the things the projects that you've been doing while in lockdown and whatnot. But in your time during this sort of new era of music making, I suppose, what sort of advice would you provide to people, musicians or music students, or any music enthusiasts, in terms of trying to sort of keep motivated, or work their way around this new sort of online world that we're living in?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Definitely see the impacts of it on the uni students, not being able to come into uni and be with their friends and have that face-to-face interaction with people is having an impact on them. You can see, and I can imagine mental health situations around the world is probably going through the roof, with all this, the general isolation factor of COVID. I mean, it will end. Of course, we know it'll end. We just don't know when, but it's a challenging one, and you can't negate it. You can't say it's not a big deal, because it is. How do you keep motivated? I don't have a problem with that. There's enough things to practice. I guess, in a way, I don't sound, and I've heard other people suggest it, but the COVID thing for me has actually been pretty good. And I think for a lot of people, it could be a blessing in disguise, in the sense it's a bit of a reset button. We've had such busy lives. The end of last year coming into this year was one of the busiest performance periods I think I've had in a long time. I could really see that we were. And I did actually say those fatal words, hey, this is starting to look like the old days, and then COVID hit, it's like, bam!
So that's your fault, basically.
Yeah, it's my fault. Sorry, everyone.
No, joking.
Note to self, do not say that ever again. But in the sense that it's a reset, you do have the time to reconsider what's important to you. For me, it was like a reconsideration of, I'm so busy doing music, other things, all these different things in music. It's all good, but what is the real purpose of, in my case, I asked myself, what is the real purpose of me being here? And I think it's being a musician at the highest level that I can be. And so that then gives you an opportunity without having all those other cluttered things going on. You can actually kind of reset and go, okay, this is a chance for me to change my life direction slightly and go in this direction more solidly and be more focused on it and take away those things. And that's a positive thing that can come from COVID, is that we can drop off a lot of the stuff we don't find important or we don't really want to do as people. I think, you know, we're on here for such a short period of time. You have to go with the thing that you do, that you love doing. You have to just chase that. You know, as they say, you're never going to go into the coffin and go, oh, geez, I wish I had another day at work. You know, you're going to want to say, geez, I wish I'd done another gig, or I wish I, you know. So you've got to focus on that thing that you love doing and just work hard at it. And I think as bad as COVID has been, it is a reset, and it gives us that opportunity to refocus, be more creative, get in touch with that part of ourselves that maybe hasn't been in touch with so much in the last few years of just being busy people that we are, you know. Yeah, so you've got to always look at the positive side of things, and that's definitely one of them for the COVID thing. Yeah.
No, it's good solid words there for sure. Now we're coming to the end of the interview. If any of the participants have a question, feel free to type in the chat. Otherwise, I'll keep powering through. But we'd come to the end almost. But to finish up, just a couple more questions. A real easy one. Not really. If you had 10 minutes to practice in a day, just only 10 minutes, what would you practice and why?
Okay, yep. I did have to think about that one, and you sent that to me. I thought, I wonder what that would be, and it came to me. It's pretty obvious. I would just practice improvising.
Okay.
Yeah, as a jazz soloist, you know, our elusive the carrot that's always elusive for us is being able to sort of have that perfect improvisation. You know, like a Bach fugue, you know, to be able to do that in an improvisation, which he did, of course, you know, show off. But, yeah, for us to do that, that's for me. So yeah, I would just practice improvising, trying to get your headspace into that sort of position. So, and it's so much fun. Like, yes, I've got lots of technical stuff I could do until the cows come home, but you know, that doesn't inspire. If I've only got 10 minutes, I'm probably just going to pick a tune and just go, all right, here we go. Off we go.
Nice. No, very cool. Any particular tune that you sort of gravitate to?
I think I keep coming back to the same things. There's a bunch in jazz. There's a bunch of sort of like set material that you've got to be able to play really well, and you keep revisiting things like the blues. You've got to be able to play the blues. You've got to be able to play rhythm changes. You know, Cherokee. I keep coming back to that one. You know, there's a bunch of, you know, half a dozen tunes you keep coming back to that are kind of like stalwarts, so you can keep investigating, and every time you come back to them years later, you go, oh, okay, I can do this in a whole different way. So it's a never-ending story. Yeah.
No, that's great. It's good, creative, fun, and yeah, just a good, almost a bit zen and meditative, I guess.
It is
kind of chillax. Yeah. Absolutely,
it is. Yep.
All right. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure, and great to catch up and pick your brains on a variety of different topics. So thank you. Now, you had mentioned before that, you know, you were like literally smashed with gigs and opportunities. Like I know you did the West Side Story end of last year, and, you know, you've been sort of working non-stop doing an array of big band things like the Dan Barnett Big Band, and you mentioned the Hammerhead thing. Are there any projects or concerts? I believe you're doing some gigs, like actually real life gigs that people should be aware of.
Yeah, I've got a webpage, andrewrobertson.net, that's got all gigs on, if people want to go past and see what gigs I'm up to. There's actually quite a few, which is really great. The thing I'm most excited about was after 30 years, I actually recorded my first album during COVID.
What?
So there you go. That's that creative thing again. We just went, okay, better do something. And so, I mean, I'd kind of been putting it off for a while, but I've recorded it. It's in the can, so they speak, mixing it in the next week or so, and then it's going to come out on LP. And that's like a jazz quartet with Andrew Dickerson, Brendan Clark on bass, John Harkins on piano, like the killer rhythm section. Simon Ferenczi's on trumpet, and then I've got 2 tracks where I've got strings. I put 4 strings and we overdub them to sound like an orchestra. So pretty excited about getting that one out. So yeah, That's a big thing for me.
Is there an album launch scheduled, or?
Not yet, but yeah, we'll definitely do one. Probably do it at Foundry, I guess. Foundry 616 in Sydney. Yeah, when it happens, we'll definitely do it. Yep. So that's kind of the project that's been taking a lot of my focus in the last little while. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so we just check out andrewrobertson.net.
Yep.
To keep
Yep.
track. Great. No
The .com
worries.
one is some phony. I don't know who it is, but
Yeah, some other guy. We don't worry about him. All right, no worries. So again, thank you this afternoon, Andrew, for coming along online and joining us for our Q&A. Absolute pleasure. So thank you very much again, and thank you all for tuning in. Any final comments, critiques, Andrew? Or
Thanks, Nathan. It's been a gas. Really, really good fun. I'm very honoured that you asked me to be on. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, as I said, like it's absolutely, fantastic to have you. You're like one of the heavy hitters in town, so it's definitely on the hit list for sure.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. Again, each and every one of you participating. Tune in next week. We actually have a slightly different show, a guest, a very, very special guest. We're going to be venturing from outside in New South Wales. It's a sort of a special edition Q&A with a Dutch saxophonist who's now moved to Melbourne. Niels Bale is going to be our special guest, and we're planning scheduling that next week, so please stay tuned for that. That's going to be quite a big deal. But anyway, hopefully you all stay safe, stay warm, and remember to wash your hands, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.